for this album, I wanted to collaborate because I wanted to grow. And I feel like I'm always looking for a way to grow. And I didn't want to do it by myself because I wanted to go to the next level. So for the majority of this record, I wrote in the studio with the other producers.
You're so sexy, tonight I am all yours, boy. The way your body moves across the floor, boy. Baby, the moment I feel your energy, the vibe is just taking over me.
That sounds crazy. Wow, okay.
If your family doesn't have much money, I want you to remember that in this country, plenty of folks, including me and my husband, we started out with very little. But with a lot of hard work and a good education, anything is possible, even becoming president. And when you encounter obstacles, because I guarantee you, you will, and many of you already have, when you are struggling and you start thinking about giving up, I want you to remember something that my husband and I have talked about since we first started this journey nearly a decade ago. Something that has carried us through every moment in this White House, in every moment of our lives. And that is the power of hope. The belief that something better is always possible if you're willing to work for it and fight for it. It is our fundamental belief in the power of hope that has allowed us to rise above the voices of doubt.
About a year ago, I got a tape of all the presidents, played it for my kids. My daughter, who's 4, she looked up, she said, "Mommy, why are they all boys?" So last night, talking about coming on the show with my children, my son is now 7, my daughter's now 5. My son says, "Mommy, are girls even allowed to be president?"
He even
last
allowed?
night. And so the point is, we are growing up in a world where most of the top jobs are still held by men. And we're going to believe in ourselves and teach our daughters that they can do anything our sons can do.
Well, since the 1980s, women have been earning more college degrees than men.
That's right.
Yet we're not seeing the translation in the front office, so to speak. Why do you think we haven't seen the progress in the last 10 years or so?
That's right. Women are stalled at the top. Women have earned more than 50% of the college degrees for 30 years. But for the last 10 years, there's been no movement at the top of corporate America.
Why?
Women are at 14%. Look, we're held back by a lot of things. We're held back by institutional barriers, lack of flexibility, really terrible public policy. We trail almost every other country. But we're also held back by things within ourselves. We're held back by the fact that we continue to do the majority of the housework and childcare. Our partners are not yet partners. In order for women to sit at more tables in the boardroom, we're going to also have to get men to sit at more tables in the kitchen.
Half my lifetime ago, I was striking an uneasy balance between the ambition I had for myself and what those closest to me expected of me. I was convinced that the only thing I wanted to do, ever, was write novels. However, my parents, both of whom came from impoverished backgrounds and neither of whom had been to college, took the view that my overactive imagination was an amusing personal quirk that would never pay a mortgage or secure a pension. I know the irony strikes with the force of a cartoon anvil now, but... So they hoped that I would take a vocational degree. I wanted to study English literature. A compromise was reached that in retrospect satisfied nobody, and I went up to study modern languages. Hardly had my parents' car rounded the corner at the end of the road than I ditched German and scuttled off down the classics corridor. I cannot remember telling my parents that I was studying classics. They might well have found out for the first time on graduation day. Of all the subjects on this planet, I think they would have been hard put to name one less useful than Greek mythology when it came to securing the keys to an executive bathroom. Now, I would like to make it clear in parenthesis that I do not blame my parents for their point of view. There is an expiry date on blaming your parents for steering you in the wrong direction. The moment you are old enough to take the wheel, responsibility lies with you. What I feared most for myself at your age was not poverty, but failure. However, the fact that you are graduating from Harvard suggests that you are not very well acquainted with failure. You might be driven by a fear of failure quite as much as a desire for success. Indeed, your conception of failure might not be too far removed from the average person's idea of success. So high have you already flown. Ultimately, we all have to decide for ourselves what constitutes failure. But the world is quite eager to give you a set of criteria if you let it. So I think it fair to say that by any conventional measure, a mere 7 years after my graduation day, I had failed on an epic scale. An exceptionally short-lived marriage had imploded, and I was jobless, a lone parent, and as poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. The fears that my parents had had for me and that I had had for myself had both come to pass. And by every usual standard, I was the biggest failure I knew. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that failure is fun. That period of my life was a dark one, and I had no idea that there was going to be what the press has since represented as a kind of fairy tale resolution. I had no idea then how far the tunnel extended, and for a long time, any light at the end of it was a hope rather than a reality. So why do I talk about the benefits of failure? Simply because failure meant a stripping away of the inessential. I stopped pretending to myself that I was anything other than what I was, and began to direct all my energy into finishing the only work that mattered to me. Had I really succeeded at anything else, I might never have found the determination to succeed in the one arena where I believed I truly belonged. I was set free because my greatest fear had been realized, and I was still alive, and I still had a daughter whom I adored, and I had an old typewriter and a big idea. And so rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life.
You've been someone who has risen up the ranks and built an extraordinary career in largely male-dominated fields. How has gender influenced your career, both in ways that have created unique challenges, but also opportunities for you?
You spend your life with your childhood. And I have lived with extraordinary women, whether it was my grandmother, my mother. My father passed away when I was 16, and my mother had to just face the hardship of a large family and single income and a desire to make sure that we were properly brought up with a lot of culture, a lot of civilization around us and a lot of love. But I was a witness to a woman who single-handedly brought up the entire family and managed to do everything. You know, she was a horse rider, she was a teacher, she was a mother, she was a car racer. She was an extraordinary role model for me, and that, I think, has been the first sort of ground floor for me from which to build and from which to have enough confidence to do the things that I thought were right.